Hi, my name's Janek Gwizdala. You're watching another interview at thelooploft.com. Well, yeah, this is one of my favorite stories right now because a few months ago I went to the studio to make a record with our good friend and fellow Loop Loft artist Bob Reynolds, the tenor saxophone player, you know, he's probably most well known for being the tenor saxophone player with the John Mayer band. And we went to cut his new record in New York, and I knew John Mayer was going to be on the record ahead of time, and I was, you know, I knew the material we were going to be playing, and I was kind of getting a basic kind of framework and structure and idea, kind of workflow, and kind of working on some sounds so that I could fit in with this session. You know, it's a sideman date, and Bob is the leader, and you know, I'm trying to serve the songs as best I can, let's say. So I took a P bass to the studio with me, and I took my Federa, and we had just a basic technical issue right at the beginning of the session, and I just, while we were trying to figure it out, I said to one of the engineers, I said, "Hey, do you have like an old crappy bass lying around the studio that maybe somebody left here, or maybe it's been here for years or whatever? I'd love to, like, you know, stick a set of strings on it and see if, you know, just have another option, like a third or fourth option for different sounds on the record." And they went away and they came back with, now unfortunately this isn't the one, but it is almost identical, and I'll tell you the story about that in a second. They came back with, there's a bass player, Jim O'Rourke, played with Sonic Youth and Wilco, like real kind of pioneer bass player, kind of avant-garde a little bit, and he's totally out there, really, really creative bass player. And he had left a Fender Musicmaster in the studio about 6 or 7 years prior to this session I was doing there. And so I put some nylon tape-wound strings on it, and I played like 2 or 3 notes, and the engineer came on the talkback and he's like, yes, in a very positive way, like, wow, what is this kind of thing. And I ended up cutting the whole record. I think I maybe cut one tune on the P bass, but the whole of the rest of the record I cut on an instrument that I'd never played before. You know, I'd never even seen a Musicmaster. I didn't know what one was. I had no idea why it only had a single pickup, and all these things. A very short scale bass, a 30-inch bass. But in the studio, it just had this fat, warm, punchy, mellow. There's so many words I could use to describe it, but it had this vibe. That was the most important thing. And I ended up cutting the whole record on it. And I was begging the studio to sell me the bass. I had a bunch of cash in my pocket. I said, look, take the money. I want to leave this session with this bass. If the owner, they couldn't get in touch with the owner. He'd moved to Japan, and he hadn't even touched the bass in 7 years, but they're like, no, we can't do that. You know, obviously it's somebody else's instrument. So I called around between takes. I was on the phone, you know, I was playing in the studio, and I was on the phone between takes calling all the music stores in New York. And eventually, after about 17 or 18 different places, I found this, and it's the same color, it's almost the same serial number, the same year, the whole deal was the one I cut that record on with Bob Reynolds and John Mayer. And it was a life-changing moment. You know, it really made me think and feel differently about my note selection, which was huge. To after playing an instrument for so long, the bass, and playing these same notes, to have that kind of refreshing kind of rebirth of discovering new notes was just phenomenal. And it's something I'm very happy happened, and I'm happy I was able to do a Loop Loft session with this bass. I think people are really gonna enjoy the sound of it. Yes, the effects. Well, effects are something. If we panned into or roamed around in my pedal closet over here, we'd come across 200 or 300 pedals. So to say I'm a pedal fan would be an understatement. I'm into effects. I'm into experimenting with sounds. We didn't get too deep into it on this particular Loop Loft session for the experimental stuff, but some of the pedals I was using, my favorite go-to pedal is the OC2, the old Boss octave divider. I think I was using a Bassballs Nano, which is kind of a dynamic filter and distortion. I have this exotic BB bass preamp, I think it's called, which I actually mess with the volume and the gain to create a distortion pedal. It's a really nice, rich, low, a distortion pedal that doesn't feel like I'm using a guitar pedal. That's something as bass players we kind of fall into a lot, is using guitar pedals, because they don't make specific bass models of those particular pedals. So it's nice when a pedal comes along and you can use it and you can hit it like a distortion and the low end doesn't disappear. So, and what else was I using? Maybe a little bit of the CP251 with the Mooga. Is that what it's called, the CP251? I think that's what it is. And you know what? I have it right here, so I should probably check that. Yes, CP251, this guy right here, for some of the what was I doing with that? Oh, with the attenuator and the LFO. I was using some LFO with that, with an expression pedal, which kind of controls the tempo of the LFO, which is really cool. This is basically a control processor, so I use it with other Mooga pedals like the ring modulator, and I think on this particular Loop Loft session I was using a low pass filter, so I was getting some with an expression pedal, which I think I have tucked under here. Yeah. Woo. I haven't used this in a while, but this is, what is this? This is the Moog, and I forget what this one's called. What is this called? I use them all, but MP201 I think this is called, and it's kind of a programmable expression pedal which works really well with all the Moog pedals. It's a CB controller, so I use that sometimes. And then, you know, my pedal setup just changes depending on which gig I'm doing or what music I'm going to play. And when I went to the studio in New York recently to cut the new record, I took tons and tons of different pedals and was experimenting with them. And the engineer's a great friend of mine, John Davis, who's a fantastic bass player, and he was throwing pedals at me like, "Oh, try this. This is a new prototype." So I'm always, you know, just like my musical influences, and I'm always open to suggestion and to searching for new sounds. You know, it's best when I go to my pedal board and all the settings have been changed by the lovely folks at TSA, and when they the security, when they check all my gear when I fly. Because actually, when I get to a gig and everything's changed, you know, I might actually find some new sounds that I wouldn't have come across before. So I'm just always open to try new things. Loops are huge for me in terms of, especially in pre-production. You know, I'm a huge fan of using, you know, real instruments and real people, and having people in the same room and interacting with each other. But the reality of geography and scheduling and budgets, and it's not the 70s anymore. So loops play a hugely important part in my pre-production. I'm working on a new album right now, which will eventually have Peter Erskine playing live drums on it when we actually go to the studio to do the session. But the higher quality of loop I can get in the beginning to do pre-production and send to the guys that I'm gonna, you know, have working on the record with me live in the studio, the better. I think that's, for me, one of the best things about the Loop Loft is the range. You know, I can have something that was, you know, somebody tapping their finger on a kneecap, or some cinematic loops or brushes or something like this, and I can really create a very realistic soundscape of what I'm looking for, you know, especially when I'm going towards making a very interactive album with live musicians. There's nothing worse than basic MIDI QuickTime sounds, you know, being programmed, or Sibelius score being played back with basic MIDI and sending that to musicians. I hate that when I get it, because it doesn't represent the music at all, and it doesn't represent the vision of the artist. So I think loops are hugely important for me in pre-production to represent that vision, especially when I'm pulling people together from all different walks of musical life and all different areas. And you know, what I really want is people to be on the same page when they arrive at the studio, to maximize the productivity of my, you know, quite often expensive studio time. So yeah, I have a new album that just came out. Like I mentioned before, we were in the studio in New York cutting that. Of course, I just happen to have a copy of it here, which I'm going to hold up for the camera. That's It Only Happens Once. That's featuring Jojo Mayer, Mark Juliana, John Ellis, Justin Vasquez, Tim Miller, really great cast of musicians, completely improvised music. We went in the studio for 2 days and cut this record. And we streamed the sessions live online, and we made a documentary out of it, which is going to be coming out very soon. We're just working on the final cut of that right now. And also, which was something very exciting for me as well, my album, The Space in Between, which was the last record with Mike Stern and Airto and Jojo Mayer and Tim Miller and all these guys, just came out in Japan. Even though it's been out in the rest of the world, digitally and physically to a small part, it just got an official physical release in Japan, which was pretty exciting. We just finished up a tour with again with fellow Loop Loft artist Bob Reynolds in Europe, which was fun. I'm out on the road quite a lot this summer with Mike Stern, which is going to be fun. We're going to be down in Brazil. There's talk of a show out in Thailand. I know we're doing some jazz festivals in Toronto and Rochester and Edmonton, some Canada and East Coast stuff. So yeah, it's busy. I have a new book coming out in the middle of the summer, all about social media and marketing and networking, all for musicians and from a musician's perspective. So the schedule is jam-packed, and as always, you can go and subscribe to my mailing list if you're interested in any of this stuff. I have a blog which I put up a ton of free content on, and you can go and check that out at janekgwizdala.com, and make sure you sign the mailing list, follow me on Twitter, and like the Facebook page, and just stay in touch. That's always the best way to find out, because we're doing this interview today, and by next week everything will have changed, or there'll be 20 more tour dates, or there'll be another record or something. There's always something happening, and even I forget about half of it. So definitely sign the mailing list and stay in touch. And thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.